Welcome to Under the Fringe. We are your hosts, Andy Yablonsky and Julie Babin, two interior designers with almost 50 years of combined experience. And while we love design, our passion has really become helping the next generation of designers struggle less, earn more, and create more freedom in their lives. We offer a whole host of support options to help you create the structures you need to really thrive and grow. More to come on that at the end of the show.
I love sales, but I know that for a lot of people, it's almost a dirty word.
Yeah, I kind of feel that way for myself. I mean, okay, so here's the thing, right? I can talk to anyone about anything that I love. For instance, like I love the Ordinary skincare brand. I will hype that up without any sponsorship. Although we would be very grateful to have sponsorship with the Ordinary if they are listening. No, like so it's a very sort of interesting thing for me because if I'm passionate about a product or a design or something else, I can absolutely talk it up without any hesitation. It's sort of selling something that I'm not really like 100% behind that becomes hard. And then I realized like, why would I sell something I'm not 100% behind?
Yeah, and that's exactly why we have a negative association with sales is like the car salesman and the insurance sales, these people who are just grinding
Yeah.
on their sales quota and they're seeing people as a number and maybe they are passionate about those things and maybe they're not, but obviously that's an easy association to make, and we're here to reframe sales because it's a huge part of just about everything that we're doing as designers, which is actually why we came up with this topic in the first place.
Yes, for sure. And so I think that what's interesting about selling is what are you selling in this business, right? There's a lot. There's the product, there's the design, then there's yourself. You're selling yourself, not in a dirty way. You're selling your very professional services, but there's so much to like all of those pieces. So that's really what we're here to kind of peel back the veneer on, as we like to say.
Yeah, lots of peeling back the veneer. And that's why I love sharing this example. I kind of chatted with Andy about it earlier because there was this, it was like a Steve Jobs short video clip, and he was talking about why Nike is such a brilliant marketing company because marketing is also sales. But he said, they don't even mention sneakers in all of their ads when you think of all the Nike, just do it, and over so many years, they've been super consistent. I think we can all say that we've enjoyed a Nike ad or two, but they literally don't even mention the actual product. They don't say sneakers, 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 buy our sneakers. They don't even talk about sneakers. They talk about the lifestyle of the athlete. Like you said, Andy, being passionate about helping people to perform at their absolute best. And that's this deeper layer. And so that's where we want to get you guys to focus because does not sound exciting. Like when you reframe sales like that, it's like, oh yeah, that's totally, as designers especially, we're really and truly selling like our experiences that we've had as a whole that's made us design in a certain way. So it's almost like you're a lifestyle brand on your own as a designer, as the lead of your firm. And so to me that makes sales sound very exciting.
I think it's just I mean, for me, what I tap into, because I think that that's true. Ultimately, we are selling a lifestyle. We're selling, function, form, beauty, habit, like new habits that we create when we create a new space. All of these things help develop someone's new pattern about how they're going to live in their new space. Whether you don't do any interior architecture and it's furnishings only, it still creates a new way of being.
Mhm.
And that is exceptionally exciting to me.
Mhm.
I love it for sure. And that's you can hear the enthusiasm in my voice, right? Like if I'm just gonna drone on about floor plan is gonna be really great for your house, like but it doesn't tap into why would you change the floor plan in the first place? It's because it's going to make your life better. This isn't about resale, it's about the quality of your experience in your home.
Mhm.
And as a designer, how can I make that better for you?
Mhm.
So, right, so part of sales, we're sort of getting into probably the first pillar here is getting the client, right? There are millions of interior designers. There are probably millions of interior designers in the Bay
Yeah.
Area alone, right?
Oh, for
Um,
sure.
and I was just joking around, like one's born every minute, right?
Yep.
You get somebody who is working on their own project and they're like, oh, I really like this. I think I've got a pretty good sense of what's happening here. And then somebody comes over and tells you, like, oh, I love what you've done with your kitchen. Would you be willing to work on my house? How much would you charge for that? And suddenly you went from being a homeowner who did their own house to being possibly a designer. And then if a lot of people like what you've done, you will have a client stream, right?
Mhm.
So the getting the client is a little bit easier because you already have a word of mouth referral system built in. But if you are not that person, or maybe you've been that person, but now like that word of mouth is you've already designed all the houses of the people that you know, right? But you still have a business. And so how do you differentiate from the competition?
Yeah.
And so we really truly believe that you are your own unique value proposition, that you are what is going to attract the business. It's not because I think at the end of the day that we all know how to design. And I'm not going to like, there are people that are starting out who don't know a lot about principles of design. There are other things, but they still have a business, right? So, welcome to the community. We want to support you. There are other people who had a longer career, who have a lot of experience, but and I would put myself in this category. Like, I haven't been a good marketer until recently, and all of my business has been word of mouth. And partly, it's not just clients that are recommending me. Oftentimes, it is vendors and contractors and other designers who, if they can't take a project, they know that I will take care of their client or their potential client exceptionally well. And
Mhm.
therefore, they feel very comfortable handing somebody off to me. Which is a huge compliment, and I understand the value of that referral network, and I would do the same for them if if I was too busy to hold on to a client and needed to pass them along, absolutely, there are people that I would refer because I know that they
Mhm.
would take care of that person in the same manner that I would with all the love and the grace and the, time management and budget management and all the other things I bring to the table, right? So it's the you that is creating this value proposition, but behind that, you have to establish the relationship with the client. And so what we actually are talking about today is relationships. Because everybody can design, right? We all know how to pick out a color palette. If people are liking what you do, you've got some talent, you are on the radar of somebody, but can you do all the other things that are going to keep the client happy to the end of the project? And that's really
Mhm.
what we are focusing on, right? Like
Yeah.
it is client success and client satisfaction at the end of the day. And also, how do you make money doing this thing that you have grown to love? Or maybe you're not loving it right now and you're like, how do I love it again or more? Welcome to the community. So, because that is certainly a space that we want to have people join us because this is hard. This business is hard. I know we say that it's hard all the time. It's not, first of all, that's a perspective, right? Like hard is different for everybody, but maybe intense is a better word.
Yeah,
Um,
and it's complex, it's layered.
yes, it is absolutely that. And so, what we are hoping to instill in our community is as intense and complex and layered as it is, that there are ways of moving and navigating all of these complexities to make things easier. And I think 100% relationships is at the core of that. And we did talk about this in another podcast, but I think that this is sort of because it's one of the most important things, really, truly.
Yeah, and we're tying it back to sales, so it'll
Yeah.
you'll get that full picture
Yep.
perspective, and sort of like how you were saying, who you are as a designer. I was gonna say, go back and listen to our episode. I think there's more than one episode on Zone of Genius, and really understanding who you are as a designer, because we're all very unique in the way that we go about it. So there are unique propositions that you offer that are very special about you, and I
Mhm.
think to be celebrated for sure. But I think we wanted to focus on it from a sales angle, especially because most people really don't like sales.
Yeah, and I think, if you can turn it into, unless you really don't like relationships, then
Yeah,
maybe
yeah, and it really is just relationships. That's
yeah.
what sales is.
Yeah, sales are relationships. So
Yeah,
if you think you're bad at sales, but you're great at relationships, congratulations, you can turn anything into a profit at this point because
yeah,
being great at relationships means everything. So, all right, so establishing the relationship with a client, I was joking around. You want to tell them who you are and what you're about, that you can manage, this large sum of money that they're entrusting you with, their budget and their timeline. That's usually super important to people to understand that you have done this a couple of times and have a really great grip on those pieces. Because at the end of the day, as much as they're gonna like connecting with you, and that is the important factor, the really important factor is that they feel held and taken care of because it's all about
right.
them.
Yeah, I was just gonna say caring for them. Of course, we're caring for ourselves too in the process, and our team, and we
Yep.
have our structures and everything in place so that we're all well cared for, including our vendors and everyone we're interacting with, but especially the client. And maybe I have a knack for that, and Andy does as well. But we genuinely, really, really like and love our clients. And I think that helps too if you can get to a place where those are the people that you're working with, people that you're genuinely really like them a lot as people. And to me, it's sort of the shortcut to that is how can I manage their expectation through every step of the process.
Yes.
And so it's great to have a design and all of this, you can plan and you can function and you can make it look beautiful, but you also need to include how much it costs and how long it's going to take, because if those two things don't line up and you're showing them something and then it takes you 2 weeks to go and price it and then it doesn't work, I don't really consider that successful of a process. And so I always like to really hone in on like creating healthy expectations to the client so they always know, like, when am I going to hear from you? That you're on top of it, that it's moving along, that
Yep.
things are tracking. So to me, I don't know, again, I think I just have a naturally caring personality, but also I think Andy and I really learned so much from the company that we worked at together. It was really like really listening to, like, okay, this client enjoys phone calls, and this client enjoys emails, and this client we can talk to on Tuesdays, and this client is available on Sunday mornings. And we always really customized the way we interacted with people. So I think we were taught to be caring, and I just can't recommend that enough, because if I was them, I would want to feel cared for certainly too, right?
I think this is almost like a love language conversation, right? Because we all feel loved in different ways, and communication is a form of love, in my opinion. Like, it makes us feel safe, it makes us feel heard and seen, and so, you know, asking somebody how they want to communicate. I remember I had a client, this is when I was working at Laura Martin Boulevard Interiors, and I would write these like very wordy emails that had a ton of information. And she wrote back and she was like, can you make this like a Twitter, like a
Yeah.
tweet? Like, I just need like the bullet points and like 140 characters would be just great. And I was like, oh, okay. Feeling like you didn't feel how much I loved you through the words that I just wrote. And then I realized like she is a busy executive with a child. and I
Yeah.
and she doesn't have time. And
Top line,
so
top line.
yes, yes. And so for her, she was like, please, please just give me the most important information and I will ask questions if I need to. And so, and I hadn't really encountered that before. And so it took me a minute, but I learned that, like everyone does have different needs in their communication style. So that's a really, I think, a salient point to understand. Your communication style might not work for everyone. So understanding what their communication style. I mean, this business honestly sometimes is like, how many backbends can I do to make you happy? And we do often contort ourselves in ways that may not be healthy. So make sure you have some boundaries set about what also works for you because
Right,
there's definitely, I think there is an innate people pleasing part of our business that we want to be aware of,
right,
and that to some degree some people pleasing, like it's the business, right? You want your clients to be happy, but I think a lot of times that a happy project starts with a happy designer. So if you're not feeling sourced and fed because of your business practices or your own personal boundaries, or something is happening in life that isn't allowing you to flourish, look there first and then see what you're doing in your communication with clients that is either helping or hindering the process and the project, because those are those go hand in hand.
yeah.
And like if you're unable to be as present as you normally would be, a client's going to notice right away and they are going to start freaking out. And people that freak out, they get snappy,
Because they're nervous.
they get nervous. Exactly.
But
It's
that's why I
fearful.
like to use the word expect, like, I like to set expectations in the beginning, like, when they know when they're gonna hear from me, how they're gonna hear from me. Is it gonna be a text message? Is it gonna be a phone call? Is it gonna be in person? What's gonna and so I and that I think using setting their expectations so they always know. I think to me what that means and the way I was trained is, and what I recommend is you word things in a way where they know what's going to happen next.
Yes.
Like, all this stuff is going on, and half the time when you say we're design developing, they don't even know what that means, right? So
Yep.
there's all this stuff going on. They don't really know when it's, they a lot of times they're just like, we're shopping for sofas. And I'm like, wait, stop. Like, that's not, you're out of the order. So they don't even understand the technical aspects of the process, obviously. But if you set the expectation, then they know, like, obviously when they can reach you, and that'll be your boundaries being instilled at the same time. But also that you're wording it. I guess what I like to think of is like a tennis match, or I don't know, something with balls.
Right.
um, is just like whose court is it in? So, like if Andy writes, longer emails, it just needs to be, which is also because like we're feelers as designers, and so we feel things, we have emotional responses to things. So I can understand when things get wordy and you want to go through it. But also it's like at the end you say, I need to hear back from you about this, like, this ball is in your court, please let me know. Or this ball is in my court as the designer, I'll get back to you by this time. And I always am a huge fan of setting expectations. I can't say enough about it.
Yep. And I also think, what I ended up doing for that client that was like, "Can you just put this in Twitter form for me? Thanks." Is that her husband was also on the emails and he, I think, did read more than her. And so I did both,
Mhm.
right? Like I
Mhm.
did my long version and then I went back, and because that was my process and it needed for me to like feel like I got everything out.
Yeah.
And I didn't skip anything. So I'm like, oh, how can I keep this as short as possible? Right? I might miss something. So I wrote it all out, and then for her, I just put, like, recap at the top, and so she wanted to only read that, and she just had that minute or 2 to sort of, like, scan it. She could, and then the email didn't change for me on my side. It was
Yeah.
still that long email. It was just underneath so that if there was anything, I could at least know that it was in writing, I had covered it, someone
Well,
was
and
reading
that's a
it.
really great point. You knew that he was there and
Yes,
able to engage more deeply in the process, and so you were able to realize, like, both him and her are actually 2 different communication styles.
totally,
So
totally.
you actually handled that really gracefully.
And also I was taking care of myself in the process. So I think that there's, the relationship, I was thinking about this morning. One of the most important relationships we have is the one with ourselves. And so when I was talking earlier about, having boundaries and making sure that you're caring, like the relationship with yourself is your strongest, most important relationship that you're going to cultivate and maintain. And it is also going to be the most winning proposition in your relationship with other people, right? So when you have a relationship with yourself and you are able to understand what your boundaries are, how you communicate, and how you like to receive communication, and you can be clear about all of that, everyone feels at ease because there's no wishy-washy. Wishy-washy is the worst, right?
Yeah.
So if you, and then this is especially true for like younger, not even younger, sorry, let me rephrase that. Maybe less experienced designers. Like you haven't built up a body of work yet. You haven't created the confidence that you want to have. You've had it maybe in other aspects of your life. Some of that's carrying over, but this is new. And so if you're in the baby stages of your business as a new designer and you have not created this level of surety in your own work, people are going to sense that,
Mhm. Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's like a limbo. Being on the middle of the fence is way worse than being on either side of the fence, even if you feel like you can't decide which side of the fence is gonna be worse.
Yeah. But I think, like I was thinking about this and I was like, okay, so what would be a scenario where, so like I do floor plans, right? I draw my own floor plans. If I drew a floor plan and I was looking at the floor plan and then also in person was like, logically, you'd want to put the sofa on this wall, but the window, for whatever reason, is off center. And I can't make the furniture plan work with that sofa off center of the window, right? It doesn't look right. It's not balanced. I'm not going to show that as a furniture plan. I just am not, because in my gut, I know that it's not right. Now, somebody else might see it differently, and your gut check might be like, that's the only place for the sofa, obviously, right? Like, we're all going to have a different point of view. But again, this is back to sales, like your confidence in the solution that you're presenting is everything. Because
Yeah.
this person doesn't know anything about floor plans. They don't know anything about fabrics. They don't know anything about materials. They have no idea about color. Sometimes we get clients that are colorblind. They're
Yeah.
trusting us implicitly to make this look good. And so when we are presenting something and we're not sure, they're definitely not sure. So cultivate your confidence.
Yeah.
Be sure in what you are putting forth. Even if it's only one thing. I mean, honestly, I try to always do three things. Sometimes they end up with two because I'm like, third one just didn't come together. Like I tried and tried, it wasn't
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah, I
So
think your confidence is that's such a great point. It is absolutely one of the most important things. So if you do feel like you're lacking in confidence, it's certainly something that we coach people on, and obviously there's other ways of learning how to do it. But if that is something, that is a goal to work on that, if that is an area that you're struggling in, because you do want to lead them and lead them with grace and beauty, and in a way that makes sense to you deeply, like you were saying with the window and the sofa, and it just doesn't feel right on your intuitive level.
yeah, I think that and that is again, like if you're able to trust your own intuition and know that this doesn't feel right, even if you can't explain it, you just know in your bones. Like I often have said, I just know in my bones that's not the right call.
Mhm. Yeah,
Right?
and I would say that couldn't be more important, because when I'm designing, I feel like I'm looking around, like, you're picking all these fabrics, you're picking all this furniture, you're looking at the plan, you're whatever, right? tile and paint and cabinets and just all this stuff is happening. And you I always go with my gut check.
Yep.
Like, I usually find the one thing that I really am like, hell yes, this is the fabric. And that's how I start to lead myself out of the mire of, so many options.
Yeah.
And that's a confidence thing. It's like, I want to run with this. And
Yep.
you feel it. But I think it comes with time. So if you don't have enough experience, just be aware of that for yourself, because there are absolute ways of getting experience, learning from other designers, learning what influences you want to have. And we can obviously recommend more things and maybe talk about that also some other time. But it's so important. I'm so glad you mentioned that.
Well, and I think,
And
I mean, we did talk about this in the last pod with, vetting a client, like how do you vet a client? And again, your intuition goes back to like, I'm forming a relationship, but that guy makes me feel creepy, or that woman just isn't, well, we're not vibing, right? That is not going to be a good project for you. Run, don't walk away,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
There's no reason, again, and we talked about this in the last pod too, but I know that there's this like starving mentality, like I don't have enough clients. I am not getting what I need to like survive right now. Take another job. Like go
Yeah.
work at Starbucks, get some benefit. I mean, literally, like don't put yourself in this position, but also where you're not making any money, but also like you want to put yourself in a healthy position where you have the ability to say yes and no.
Yeah. Even when it's
And
scary,
yes.
it's just could not, because eventually you want to curate the type of clients that you say yes to, the type of projects and the type of things that you do, because those, for lack of a better word, it is a branding vehicle, and it will allow you to call in more of that and more of the things that you want. And so it's very scary. It's easy to get caught up in. I just have to do everything. But I don't recommend it.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, aside from being foundational piece of your business where you are trying to cultivate a brand and everything else, like take care of yourself, right?
Yeah.
Again, like it's the airplane model, like put on your own oxygen mask first and then take care of everybody else. Like it's overused because there is probably not a truer thing. And again, as women, we are default almost is to take care of everybody else and then like pick ourselves up off the floor after we've depleted ourselves in
Mhm.
service of all the other things, and then possibly even ask the question like, what do I need? I am encouraging every woman to ask yourself what you need first. I know self-care is a big buzzword right now, but it's a really important one, and so I think uh it's out there as big as it is for a reason. So, best relationship is yourself. Next best
Yeah.
relationship is you and the client. And let's say that you did get a client that you wanted, like it was a great fit all around, you've done the vetting processes, and how do you keep this client happy? And Julie has a great story that actually sparked this entire conversation. Take it away, Jules.
Yeah, and I was gonna say too is like, you were talking about self-care. That is the way that you make yourself feel seen and heard. And then now we're switching over to the clients feeling seen and heard. And it dovetails into sales and running a business and keeping the business going and keeping profit and then bringing in more business. But I think the self-care and that idea of you personally want to feel self and seen and heard because you're taking such great care of yourself. We also were laughing over the weekend because Andy watched this movie, and we realized, oh, it's about that client feeling seen and heard. It was that everyone, you guys have seen the comedy with Steve Martin and Meryl Streep. It's complicated. And he's an architect. And there's that really cute scene where I guess she sent a bunch of emails about her design and what she wants to the owner of the company, thinking that he's going to read all the emails. But but the Steve Martin character was the one who, took all the information in and was processing it through and created this beautiful design for her, but she didn't realize that he had done that for her. And but it was a funny scene because she's talking to the other guy and he's like, Adam did that, Adam did that, Adam. And then finally she was like, oh, wait, you're Adam? Oh, hi, Adam. Oh my God. And then she just has this, like, her whole body relaxes. She just felt so seen. And that's what we're talking about with, like, caring for people too. But there was this fun story when I was at the company in New York City, Clodagh, a lot of you probably know who that is, who's amazing. And we were in this giant meeting because there was like a 30,000 square foot house, if you can believe it, um that we were working on in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and the architect was there. And so he had just so much experience because these were big houses and he had been doing it for years and years. So he was this, like, wise, great architect guy. And I'll never forget, we were in this, it was an internal, design team meeting. The client wasn't there. And he just was saying, you need to sell the client. Of course, at the beginning, like, that's obvious. You're going to say, look at how great my design is. And everyone's going to get excited because they're seeing it for the first time. And that's an obvious, like, selling point is your presentations, getting excited, also keeping the energy up, obviously, is a tactic I use, kind of keeping the meeting not too short but a little bit short so the excitement kind of stays up. But then his point was, guess what? We need to sell them again in the middle of the process, like in the middle, like when the contractor is pouring the foundation and we're kind of drudging along and, like, maybe the energy is a little bit down. Well, I and Andy, we personally believe that also part of our job is keeping the energy up. And we realized, oh, this is about sales. And so we started practicing, yeah, the beginning, like, okay, you get the job, and then sort of still at the beginning are the design presentations, but then you're in the middle and the contractor's doing all this stuff and the cabinet guy and you're approving stuff, and maybe the energy's a little bit down. And a lot of times the clients forget,
Yes.
like, what they approved or what this looks like or which room is that going in, and they just don't remember a bunch of stuff. And so we were creating these little shortcut, like, visual sheets. But I just always find that I am aware, maybe it's because I'm aware of, like, the energetics, and I always want to bring the energy and keep it up. And so this architect was saying, like, yeah, sell the design again in the middle. Like, oh yeah, oh right, yeah, I got it, that's also part of my job. And then he was saying, and guess what, you got to sell it at the end too. Because, and that could not be more true, because a lot of times they'll move into their house, or also for me, and Andy too, like, we've worked on a lot of restaurants, and maybe they're opening their restaurant or they're moving into their house, and you have to sell the design again, because sometimes people will just sort of not be nitpicky, but they kind of just have their default mode of how they use their house or whatever. And so they might be, like, a little disoriented when all this new stuff is done. And like, oh, this is different than what I had before. And it's almost like you need to sell it all over again. And we just found that to be such a great, like, words of wisdom, words to live by, because it's just reminding them why we did it this way. Why is your day-to-day life going to be so great now? And I don't know, for me, it's just something that I've always been extremely passionate about. And I shared it with Andy just yesterday. And we realized, oh gosh, there's the sales component again. So we
Yep.
couldn't recommend that more. And again, I think it's about keeping energy, excitement, joy, and reminding them why we did stuff before their, like, critical brain kicks in, or before, like, the neighbor comes over or the mom or somebody comes over and rah, 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 because people get in our clients' ears. So I think that, like, could not be, like, a better word of wisdom for you guys to just keep, because then, obviously it starts to become like, well, okay, now this project's over, what am I going to do next. And so, of course, you want your clients to end on a high note. For you want them to be jumping for joy, excited, because that will most likely turn into them recommending you for something else.
Absolutely. And I think the piece, you know, selling in the middle, um, is not just about reminding the client about what they picked, but it's also like the weekly updates, right? So it's not just
Mm-hmm.
the middle, it's like the whole time.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's the weekly updates, it's the, you know, status report that you're sending. But I mean, this just happened to a friend of mine where the client was like, I did not approve that. Well, you sure did, because you signed this proposal, you paid this money, and like we ordered it. And so, you know, and it's so scary as a designer to have somebody say, I didn't approve that, or that's not what I picked.
Hmm.
And you know that it is of course what they picked, because they did send in a check with a signature at the bottom of the proposal. If you're
Hmm.
not doing that as a designer, please stop and go to the manual.
Hmm.
Right? Like, this is an incredibly important step. So, you know, they sign the proposal, and then you as the designer are like, "Great, this is now a legal contract between you and I. I am to order the thing that was on that proposal. I have now ordered it, right? That is my fiduciary responsibility to you. I have ordered the thing that you wanted, and now you're telling me 10 weeks into the process, 4 weeks before it's due, that you didn't order that." So, right, you want you want to make sure that um not only did they remember what they ordered, but they know that it's on order and that it's coming. It is coming.
Hmm.
And then
Yeah, the
once it
weekly
arrives,
updates. That's a good
yes.
point.
Yes. So it's not just, you know, quote unquote the middle. It's literally like every week when you're providing this information. And then and if you're thinking, wow, this job sounds like a lot, you're correct. It's a lot. But again, these processes ending on a high note gets you get to the high note when you stick to the pathway.
Hmm.
And so, super important. But,
Yeah.
and I'm but trust me, I have done it the other way, and, it wasn't that the project turned out badly, but I honestly damaged the relationship with the client. Like, you know, they're not somebody that I've kept in touch with. So it's not you can do it any way you want, right? Everyone has autonomy. We're recommending, like, what we feel is the smoothest, best approach to this, because in the end, you know, we want people to recommend us. We want them to sing our praises, and not just when somebody walks in and they're like, "Oh, your designer did a great job." Yeah. Mhm. Right? Not like, "Oh
Yeah.
my god, and she was fabulous," right? Like,
Yeah.
that's the compliment I want. Like, I don't
Yeah.
want somebody just to acknowledge that I did a good job. I want them to say my firm name. I want them to pass along my business card. I want them to text their friends my phone number, all of the
Hmm.
above, right? So that really does happen when you have kept somebody in the loop, because it keeps their fear down, their expectations again and again. Like, what do we say about marketing? Like, you have to see something 7 times before you consider
Mm.
buying it, and then
Yeah.
another, right? So, like, they may have seen that thing a few times and they trust you, but if they aren't seeing it on the regular, um, are they still gonna love it? Are they still right? So, like, you just want
Yeah.
the level of, and there's also, there's this, like, psychology
Hmm.
experiment where, um, this one group of people was given the opportunity to, select a piece of art, and, uh, once they selected it, it was theirs, they could take it home and have it forever. Second group of people, select a piece of art, but if you didn't like it, you could return it and get something else. Who was the happier group?
The ones who got to keep it forever.
Yes.
Hmm.
And it's because options stress us out. So once we decide on something, we're actually emotionally more stable than if we have to keep making decisions.
I
And
love that.
so, when we are able to remind a client of their decision, and and they're able to visually see it. So there's a lot of great software now where you can have the client access their mood board online
Mhm.
and kind of go back and revisit or show their friends, whatever. But um it is a touch point for them to stay connected to their project visually. And so even if you've given them a piece of paper, like they may have thrown it away, right? Having this stuff
Mhm.
accessible in a digital file somewhere. So if you're old school and you're like, I just do everything on Photoshop, I personally am also that person. Like there's a Dropbox file that the client can go in and like see their drawings, they can see their room boards, and they can see their proposals so that everything is available to them. They can go on at 2 a.m. and calm the panic that's in their heart if they wanted
Mhm.
to, right? There's no
Yeah.
surprises. Um, and then at the end of the project, where we're installing the furniture, like how many times have I had a client, oh my God, the rug is so big. It's so
Yeah.
big. It's too big. The
Yep.
sofa, the sofa's too big, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's
Their eyes aren't
not
used to it.
too big. It's different from what you had before.
Yep.
And you were making decisions as a person who doesn't understand space and proportion. So I get
Yeah.
it, right? And
Yep.
so there's all these things where then we have to be on site. I love it when the clients come home after I've been on the installation and I'm still there. And I say, ta-da, here's your beautiful room. What do you think?
Mhm.
It's like this unveiling.
Mhm.
And it creates this, like then you can calm them down because you are again selling the design that they've paid for and
Right.
approved and everything else, but it's a shock to them, right?
And the other
They're-
thing that happens in those moments, like you were saying, it's so good to be there as soon as they're seeing it sort of for the first time. Because
Yep.
also, bonus, guess what happens when you start walking through with them? Obviously, you're calming down their nerves, reminding them how amazing you are. I mean, the design is.
Yes. Both.
And but then what starts to happen is, oh, we're gonna need this, and oh, we're gonna also need that, and oh, this, and oh, that, and then boom. I mean, that happened on this one project. And granted, it was a hotel, so it's a larger than a house. But I mean, just because we walked through with them at the end of this phase, which is a big completion moment of like
Yeah.
a couple of areas, we ended up with like $100,000 proposal of new stuff that they thought of because we walked through with them.
Well, I think that that's absolutely true for a residential project as well.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, the fireplace looks
I'm
bare. Do you
gonna.
think we need some art
Yep.
there?
Yep.
Oh, maybe a lamp here. Well, we had a lamp in the plan, but you decided against it.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
all of that. There's all of that. So it is another sales opportunity. And when I say sales opportunity, like I don't want to be crass and be like, yeah, make some more coin. Easy,
Yeah.
easy, easy, right? Like it's
But it's
also a way
things they're
to
asking for.
yeah, yeah, and it's a way to support the design and make it better. So
Yeah.
um it's not just a sales opportunity. It is an
Yep.
opportunity to further a relationship. It's an
Yep.
opportunity to create more beauty, and yes, it is an opportunity to make more money. Congratulations.
Mhm.
That's a
Mhm.
wonderful added bonus.
And I
And
think that's
then
a perfect example of the type of sales that we're
yes.
recommending. It's
Yep.
it's through passion. Like clearly they love the space. They want that floor lamp that they realize now they need it.
Yep.
And you of course already believed in that item, and so it's a beautiful sales process.
Yeah, it's really a partnership and a collaboration at that point.
Mhm.
And the sales are just a byproduct, which I think is really like that's how I love to run my business is that this is a byproduct of the relationship I've built versus this push to have somebody get me out of my survival mode, right? Like
Mhm.
I don't want to be in the survival mode where like I really need you to spend $50,000 because my mortgage is due and I've got this car payment and there's right like
Yeah.
no one likes that feeling of like neediness on the other side of the relationship. It is why men run away from a lot of women that they're dating because they can
Mhm.
feel this pressure on the other side. It's also why women run away from men.
Yeah. Yeah,
and
exactly, that's a great
people
point.
in
No
general,
desperation.
right? Like if
Mhm.
you're dating the same sex, like if it's just not working out because you feel pressure from somebody, it is because you are feeling like you can't meet that person's needs, or their needs are too much for you. Not that you're too much, but too much for that person, right? And so again, it's like these relationships are this is not rocket science. It is psychology,
Mhm.
and it's super important to understand the psychology um
Mhm.
of relationships, because this is what you're doing, right? Like if you think that design is purely just I'm going to throw out this terrific floor plan and slap some furnishings options in front of somebody that are just spectacular, but you don't have a connection to like your why, and you don't have an understanding of what somebody needs, spectacular or not, it's not going to go very well.
Yeah,
Um, and so, and we also wanted to, I think, briefly touch on like, it's not just these client relationships that you have, like beginning, middle,
yeah.
end. There are so many people involved in the system, right? So we've got
Mhm.
contractors. I can't tell you how many times I've been recommended for a job from a contractor.
Mhm.
That's probably 35 to 40% of my business recommendations are from contractors. Um, and then and so, the communication with the contractor is incredibly important if you're doing construction. Again, this is a part of a system that is really, really important in terms of having the project go well and turn out the way that you want it to, on time and on budget, right?
Mhm.
There are multiple, again, it's complex. There's multiple things that are being managed all at the same time. So when I joke around about juggling chainsaws with babies, like, yeah, it's a joke, but at the end of the day, sometimes it really does feel kind of like this life or death pressure to, like, oh God, the tile's not going to make it in time for the tile install. But if I had told the contractor and like kept them abreast of the schedule, they may have scheduled something different at that time so that the tile would have had a chance instead of having to like reschedule everyone. And if you haven't done a lot of construction, um,
Mhm.
if you haven't done a lot of construction, then possibly you may not know this, but getting subs to a job site is incredibly difficult, especially in today's
Right.
climate where there's a lot of demand. And so rescheduling somebody might mean a month delay.
Yeah, the momentum shifts at a certain point.
And so, that communication is incredibly important. So whether like you have a good relationship with the contractor or not, you better have great communication.
Yeah.
Um, And actually, I was recently on a job where I was communicating with the contractors, and this was somebody I hadn't ever met before. They came highly recommended via a friend, and we had a start date that had shifted a couple of times, but later, so it wasn't like it had been moved up. And then due to a budget concern, like we went from plastering the whole bathroom, which was $35,000, uh, to
Mhm.
to tiling just the shower and like behind the vanity wall, and
Mhm.
it's significantly less, right? Um, so we made that change, and it was kind of a last minute change, but
Mhm.
the the subs for the tile could have been lined up because that was still probably 8 to 10 weeks away. And so we're proceeding as though the start date was happening. Client cleaned out their kitchen and their bathroom. And then 3 days before the job started, the contractor wrote to us and said, I'm so sorry, we can't start the job on the
Ugh,
date. We can start. And it was literally a month later. And I was
yikes.
just like beside myself because I
Yeah.
couldn't understand how this had happened when I had been. And then I looked back at the communication, and I had been communicating with them on a fairly
Mhm.
regular basis, but I actually wasn't getting responses in a timely manner. And then they were like, we need these drawings. And so again, the project was really like a hair and makeup. It was replace in kind what was there. And so I had said that I was only doing drawings of things that were new, which was a pantry. Um, and like where the light fixtures were going because those were changing.
Mhm.
And they actually needed drawings that had everything on them. And I didn't know that until, like it was kind of too late. They didn't explain that that's for their process and everything else, that that's what they would have needed. And so it was just it, it was a shit show, really.
Mhm.
Um and it was heartbreaking because the client was frustrated, and because I'm still in the middle of all of this, I can't tell you how it's going to turn out, but I will let you know in future podcasts. But that's just one example of like I didn't have a prior relationship, and I maybe should have been more clued in to the lack of communication from them, that this wasn't
Yeah.
going well.
And
um,
just like you have options of coffee tables and fabrics, you'll have options of vendors,
yep.
especially when there's a tight time frame. You need
Yep.
to make sure you have, if it's movers or contractors or these companies that get extremely busy. I think it's good to go ahead and have options there, just like you would have options of your furniture and your other selections.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing too, as we're talking, sorry, I'm like kicking my coffee cup around. Um, the thing that we were talking about yesterday in relationships was
Hmm.
like when you need a favor from somebody, and I don't ask for favors very often, but I have built really good relationships so that if I need to like call somebody and be like, "Hey, can you start this job in 2 weeks?" And they pick up the phone and they're like, "I actually could." Awesome.
Hmm.
See you there, right? Like, that I have a contractor that I can rely on to show up for me. And I mean, also it worked out with his schedule. So he was a yes because there happened to be like a hole in the schedule at the moment. And he wouldn't have done that if there wasn't a hole, right? Like it had to
Yeah.
work out with his timing too. But um like that was shorter for his typical process. Like he had to really hustle and get a bunch of people in line, but he was willing to do it because I asked and because
Nice.
we had this prior relationship. And
Yeah.
so, right? And so there's not there is so much goodwill when we create healthy relationships full of communication. It calms
Yeah.
everybody down. People don't feel the need to get like mean or nasty because the communication has been really tight.
Right.
And then the other thing that we're talking about, which I know we're kind of like running out of time, and this could be a longer, a much longer
Yeah.
podcast, but we were also having this discussion around the communication. So like a lot of times we have a budget and we have a schedule. A lot of times, most of the time.
Every
There's
time.
it's rare that we don't have one or the
No,
other
you
or
need to,
both.
if even if you don't have a budget or a schedule, you need to ask the team or the client, what do they want their schedule and budget to be? Because even if the answer is sort of I don't know, you want to start to have a rough sense of something that you can track.
Well, and you create it, right? Like if or you
And
develop
you
it
need
with
it for your
someone else.
fees. I mean, at the end of the day,
Yeah.
you need it for your company
Yep.
to arrive at the fees that you quoted on time and everything involved with that. And of course, every project's very complex and different, and people are buying and selling real estate, and there's all permitting, there's all this stuff that can engineering, all this stuff that can take a long time. But you want to have something to track. So even if they're, say, I don't know about budget or schedule, we always recommend that you have those things in place because that's part of our like checklist of like how do you actually remain successful.
Yes. But I think that, so like let's say that you have created a budget and a schedule and the client's like, "Great, great, 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 great. Whoa, what's this construction administration about?" Right?
Hmm.
Because it's a little bit of a question mark. Because we don't recommend that you uh estimate, like you would estimate construction administration, but
Hmm.
every if you've not worked with the contractor before, you've not worked with the client before, you don't know whether there's going to be 10 changes a week or 0. You don't
Right.
know if you're going to have to be on site every single week during the project or every other week. You don't know if you're going to be able to be remote on a project, or right. So like there's all these
Yeah.
variables that are like that's the one place where I'm like, don't estimate it. Like you could say it's going to be between 4 and 8 hours a week if it's a bigger job, or 1 to 2 hours a week if it's a
You can
smaller
put a
job.
range.
Yeah, but I don't. don't like put that in your flat fee or it, right? It's like
It's an
you want to
estimate.
give, yes, it's an estimate. You want to give some idea, but it's not, you're never locked in. So, but let's say that you give that estimate and the client's like, that's just going to put us right over the edge. Like, I want to limit your construction administration. Okay. Right. That's fine. But so this is the part again where the communication is so important. And I think, we've both had jobs, and I'm sure many people can attest to this kind of situation where, like, you're starting to run out of money. Most construction projects go over budget for a variety of reasons, whether it's the client changing their mind, which happens a lot, or there's some kind of delay, and that creates a budget problem as well as a timeline problem. There's all kinds of reasons why money gets tight at the end of construction. And
Yeah.
often, it's like, "Oh, we didn't realize this thing was in the wall and now we have to move it. There's a dead body under here." Like, right, whatever. It's a ancient burial ground. Um, whatever whatever the most extreme example you can think of. I mean, often mine are like, there's that sewer pipe that's in the way of the new bathroom that we have to, like,
Yeah, remodels are
relocate.
get
And
ready to
yeah.
buckle up on a remodel.
So again, like, it's great to have a 20% contingency when you're doing a remodel
Yes,
because,
especially remodels.
yeah. So again, this is part of communication. Like, those contingency fees are very, very important. You want to make sure those get in, and we'll talk more about that in another episode. But the point I'm making is, like, the client might say, "I don't have the budget for that,"
Mhm.
and all they understand is, like, the bottom line, right? But again, part of our job is to explain the impact of that. So it's not just a bottom line, but, like, let's say that they don't want you on site and they're like, "Well, I'm limiting your hours, or I don't need you for this part." That's
Mhm.
totally fine. I just want you to understand that if something gets executed differently from the drawing for whatever reason and something changes, that is going to impact the design. And if you're not aware of how it's going to impact the design, you may not like the finished product in the end. And at that point, you are either living with that finished product or you are ripping it out and changing it so that it is correct.
Mhm.
And if I'm not on site to monitor that, I cannot tell you how that impact will go. Are
Yeah.
you sure you don't want me to come on site at these critical moments to make sure everything is correct?
Mhm.
Right? It's just information. But
Yeah.
I'm not joking around in that, like, there are things that I mean, sometimes it's like the tiniest detail, but you've spent hours creating that detail and somebody doesn't understand it in the right way, or there's a
Yeah.
reason that it has to shift for whatever reason, but suddenly, like, everything is off. And I know that sounds crazy, but we all know, like, if the tile setter didn't set the tile where the center of the tile was centered on the shower head
Yeah.
or on a grout line, that's even more specific,
Yep.
um, that the whole design would look completely off
Yep.
if those things didn't happen. And I can't tell you how many times I walk into a bathroom that we're about to remodel and the client's like, "Hey, can you just make sure because the tile is off center of the shower head and it looks horrible."
Yeah.
Horrible, right? And so these people that are hiring us are visually savvy. They're savvy enough to know that they need help, and they want it to look correct at the end of the day, and it's our job to make that happen, and oftentimes that happens during that construction administration phase. So, I think it's a super important, and I think we should probably have an expanded episode on some of this. Like,
Oh,
CA is
for
a
sure.
big world.
Yeah.
But again, this just goes back to the communication. Like, I just want you, client, to understand that, like, by limiting this part of the project and this budget, I'm like, I get it. If you don't have the money, you don't have the money, but perhaps set money aside for later when you are ready to fix that mistake that's inevitably going to show up in this area. Um, because in one way or another, and again, some people are like, ah, it's fine. I'm just going to leave it. Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
but at
Yeah.
least you told them.
Right. So or it's just not as bad as she said it was gonna be.
Yeah.
Um, which is often when, like, it's not that bad. And then other times, I mean, I have a couple of clients who are, like, they literally see measurements to the eighth of an inch
Right.
and can, like, bird's eye view from across a room. Well, that cabinet door and that
Yeah.
cabinet door are not equal, and it drives them absolutely insane.
Yeah, and that goes back to, like, how we were saying earlier, know your
Know your
client.
client. Yep.
The woman who's the Twitter
Yep.
feed, she might not see the things like you're the eighth of an inch from across the room since she's Twitter feed.
Yeah.
The one who sees it from across the room is probably the type of person who's going to read the really long email potentially. You just can start to see these patterns in the way that you're
Yes.
communicating with them. But either way, make sure you start to really figure out like who are these people that I'm working with because you want to know what their tolerances are.
Yeah. So anybody that tells you cash is king is wrong. It's communication.
Communication is king. Yeah.
Communication is king.
Yeah.
All right, I think
I
that's
love
what we've
that.
got for today. Um,
Yeah.
and this was a super juicy, rich episode. I hope that you all feel more prepared to go out and communicate your buns off. And I know I feel like I need to actually brush up on some of my communication.
And ready to reframe this idea of sales because I think it will really allow you to see who you are as a designer. What are your philosophies, the ways
Yep.
that you've been influenced, the way that you design for all these different reasons, which I was saying earlier, go back to the Zone of Genius episodes as well that we recorded previously.
Yep.
Because that is like such a huge reframe in sales and the truth is that people actually like to be sold to when it's done really well like we all like the Nike commercials because they're good commercials.
Yep.
They're inspiring. It makes you, even if you're not a runner, you're like, oh, I should go be more active.
Or what shoes do I need to, perform my best today? Sometimes it's a
Yeah.
pair of spike heels when I'm walking to a client meeting that I just need to feel a little taller. So it's not just the Nike, but I think again it's sort of like putting your best foot forward. That's sort
Yeah.
of the spirit of Nike, and like however whatever footwear that is required to do that for you is going to help you and your business grow. If you would like a tidier version of all of our podcasts and like some juicy materials to sink your teeth into, please visit us at subscribe to the podcast, become a member of the community, and purchase the manual. If it feels,
Hmm.
there's parts of the manual, it's a la carte situation, and there's also the whole shebang. So whatever suits your business and your needs at the moment, there's a lot of info in there that will help you tackle these day-to-day issues. And then we can, as a community, come together and really create a space where problem solving and solutions are at the ready, because we all have moments in design that are very sticky wickets that require more than just one person. Welcome aboard. We'll see you there.
Welcome aboard. Thanks for listening and being part of our community. Speaking of community, please head over to our website and sign up for podcast alerts and blog posts. And if you're looking for more resources to uplevel your business, create more time in your schedule, and improve your profits, we have a blueprint for your success that covers mindset, systems, business, teams, and tools. Think of us as your unaccredited university. Visit us at under-the-fringe.com and tune in next week for our next deep dive on creating more freedom and less struggle.